You love to speak truth to power, and we always should, but you have completely lost the ability to speak truth to bullshit. Life is random. The only word to describe it when a big game hunter gets trampled by an elephant and then eaten by lions is hell. They buried the Hunter Biden story before the election because they were like, we can't risk having the election thrown to Trump. Of any matters of politics or what's right or wrong, the one thing I know for sure about America is this. It's run by... You love to speak truth to power, and we always should, but you have completely lost the ability to speak truth to bullshit.
Bill Maher is no stranger to controversy, and he's made a name for himself by fearlessly tearing apart the sacred cows of political correctness. His most recent target? None other than Whoopi Goldberg, the longtime co-host of The View. But this wasn't just another one of those typical celebrity spats that seems to pop up every now and then. This was something far more entertaining, a full-on takedown of the kind only Bill Maher could deliver. Now, Whoopi Goldberg has always been outspoken, particularly when it comes to her views on politics and social issues. Over the years, she's gained a reputation for being one of the leading voices in the woke movement, proudly championing progressive causes on her platform. But sometimes, even the most confident voices can step into a hornet's nest, and that's exactly what happened.
Mean girls. Mean girls in the press and in politics and...
This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each
Democrats.
But that's their fault. They're the ones that go out.
They're
the ones that go out there and they stand on this moral high ground. They don't have to do that
in life. And when they smell blood in the water, the lust to finish off a vulnerable person will never be denied.
Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law.
Happened when she tried to challenge Maher on live television. The whole thing started when Bill Maher made a point about the challenges faced by Black Americans. His argument was simple but profound. Black people in America can't afford to indulge the woke tendencies of rich, white liberals who endlessly flagellate themselves for the sake of virtue signaling. Maher's point wasn't to belittle anyone, but rather to highlight the disconnect between the issues that truly affect Black communities and the more performative actions of the privileged elite. What Black people really want, Maher argued, are basic necessities, affordable prices, good jobs, and police that actually show up when you call them. It was a point that should have been obvious to anyone with a basic understanding of socioeconomic reality, but when Maher made his statement, Whoopi Goldberg decided to step into the ring and challenge him. She did what many who feel cornered often do. She reached for a straw man argument, one that was about as flimsy as it was misguided. Goldberg tried to
vote for the former prosecutor who actually had policy plans to help the working class.
Criticism is valid because, Democrats stand on this moral high ground all the time. And, they act so self-righteous.
Lincoln and get rid of the police. Just, no. It's not that I've gotten old. It's that...
Turn the conversation into a critique of Maher's statement, accusing him of simplifying complex issues. She quickly veered into the territory of advocating for a former prosecutor who had a plan for the working class, somehow implying that Maher's comments about the struggles of Black Americans were connected to this prosecutor's political platform. But Maher wasn't having it. He immediately called out Goldberg's argument for what it was: nonsense. The back and forth grew tense. Goldberg's argument was going down in flames, and Maher's responses were sharp, biting, and packed with the kind of biting sarcasm he's known for. The whole segment felt like watching someone take a wrecking ball to a fragile house of cards, and Whoopi seemed to realize the game was up. She had tried to spin the narrative, but Maher was there to call out her inconsistencies with an ease that only a seasoned talk show host could manage. To understand just how devastating Bill Maher's rebuttal was, let's look at how he dismantled Whoopi's position. Maher had made a point about Black Americans wanting simple, practical solutions to their problems, things like economic security and public safety. But Whoopi, apparently having lost track of the main issue, decided to bring up a former prosecutor as the solution. It was a desperate attempt to make the conversation about something other than what Maher had raised. But Maher wasn't fooled for a second. He immediately pointed out how absurd it was for Goldberg to twist his words in such a clumsy manner, accusing her of having no coherent argument. The response was as brutal as it was hilarious. Maher's jab about the absurdity of her statement, "Let's tear down statues of Lincoln and get rid of the police," was not just a critique of her logic, but a reminder that when you start down the road of progressive ideology without a firm grounding in reality, you end up making ludicrous suggestions. Maher knew exactly what he was doing, and he was more than ready to expose Goldberg's flimsy reasoning for all to see. It wasn't just that Maher was winning the argument. He was doing so with a flair that turned the exchange into something far more than a typical TV debate. His sarcasm cut deep, and his calm demeanor only made the weight of his words even more impactful. You could practically see Whoopi scrambling to catch up, her attempts to deflect simply not working in the face of Maher's precision. But this wasn't the first time Maher had done something like this. In fact, he had previously gone toe-to-toe with The View's other co-host, Sunny Hostin, in a similarly fiery exchange. Sunny, like Whoopi, had tried to catch Maher in a gotcha moment, putting words in his mouth that Maher had never said. Again, Maher's sharp rebuttal exposed the absurdity of Sunny's position, and it was clear that The View's usual tactics weren't going to work on someone like Maher. With the heated back-and-forth playing out before a national audience, Bill Maher reminded everyone of one simple truth. The View might have its liberal base, but that doesn't mean everyone has to buy into their brand of woke logic. Maher's takedown wasn't just an attack on Whoopi. He was, in essence, taking aim at the entire culture of politically correct orthodoxy that has become so pervasive in mainstream media. As the conversation continued, Maher dug into the issue of selective outrage and the hypocrisy that pervades the left-wing movement. He talked about the Democrats' moral high ground and how they love to posture about ethics and righteousness, but when their own side was guilty of wrongdoing, suddenly, the rules didn't apply. Maher drew a clear parallel between the Hunter Biden scandal and the way the media and political establishment had worked overtime to downplay it in the name of protecting the Biden family. Maher was relentless in calling out the selective outrage that ran rampant on the left, and his criticisms were spot on. Whoopi, trying to defend the indefensible, argued that Biden hadn't lied when he said no one is above the law. But Maher wasn't buying it. To him, it was clear that
we have got to get past this endless, unforgiving, zero-tolerance mindset bent on punishing and disappearing you. It's karma. There's no such thing as karma, sorry. Hearing anyone caught saying the wrong thing. The right response to speech you don't like is more speech. Stop saying that Whoopi Goldberg getting yanked from The View right after she attacked me on The View.
That Hunter Biden, guilty as charged, had been allowed to walk free because his father sat in the Oval Office. The hypocrisy couldn't have been more obvious, and Maher wasn't afraid to call it out. As he pointed out, if anyone else had been caught up in the same situation, they would have faced far harsher consequences. But Maher didn't stop there. He also called attention to the mainstream media's role in covering up the Hunter Biden story during the election cycle. He pointed out that major outlets like the New York Times and CNN had worked to bury the story, dismissing it as Russian disinformation while actively censoring dissenting voices. Once again, Maher's unflinching honesty stood in stark contrast to the carefully crafted narratives being put forth by Goldberg and others in her orbit. As the exchange continued, Maher's critiques went deeper. He argued that the political system in America was a joke, with the media and political elites working in tandem to maintain their power while keeping the average American in the dark. He spoke directly to the fact that the working class, regardless of race or background, was being left behind while the elites bickered over trivial matters and woke ideologies. He was especially sharp in calling out the hypocrisy of the political left, who championed diversity but never seemed to allow for diversity of thought within their ranks. Bill Maher's ultimate point was clear: the left had lost its way. Instead of focusing on the issues that mattered to ordinary Americans, they had become consumed by a culture of outrage, virtue signaling, and moral grandstanding. The woke mob, as Maher put it, had forgotten the basics of good governance and critical thinking. Instead of engaging with real issues, they were too busy policing speech and punishing anyone who dared to think differently. Maher's verbal dismantling of Whoopi Goldberg and the larger woke culture wasn't just a good television moment, it was a much-needed wake-up call for anyone still clinging to the illusion that political correctness and virtue signaling would solve the real problems facing America. If anything, it showed that the conversation needed to be far more nuanced and based on reality, not emotional extremes and political posturing. By the end of the segment, It was clear that Maher had not just won the debate, he had completely exposed the weaknesses of the arguments put forth by Goldberg and her crew. Whoopi's attempt to defend the indefensible only highlighted the flaws in her logic, and Maher's unfiltered, unapologetic response was the perfect antidote to the ever-growing tide of woke orthodoxy. It was, without a doubt, a moment that would go down in television history, a stunning example of the power of sharp, honest discourse in an age where such conversations are often hard to come by.